We're so glad to have our kids with us today. And it's actually the final weekend of the summer, if you can believe it. Now, we have been spending time, kids, you might not know this, we've been spending time in a book called 1 Corinthians. And 1 Corinthians was this letter that Pastor Paul wrote to a city in Corinth. That's where we get Corinthians, Corinth. And these people in the Corinthian church, they were a part of a church family. And there were all sorts of people in this church family, kind of like our church family. Now, we had guys, we had girls, we had old people, we had young people, just like our church. That's what was exactly happening in the Corinth church. So I'm going to draw some hair on this guy. There we go. I guess that's not Pastor Jonathan. I'll leave this one right here. This can be Pastor Jonathan. Let's give him a smile. There he is. Perfect. Oh, look, you're looking fantastic, Pastor Jonathan. We'll give her some hair. Give her some short hair. There we go. And you know what? There was old people in this church, and so I'll give somebody a cane. I won't give that to Pastor Jonathan just yet. There we go. And we had some little kids. We had some kids. We had some babies. There was all sorts of people that lived in Corinth and that were a part of this church. There were some people who were really, really rich. So I'm going to give this guy a big bag of money. He was like a business owner. And then there were some people who were poor. They didn't have a lot of money. They were the servants, and so they would serve the rich people. Corinth was a really important place. It was called a port city. And if you know what a port city is actually on the water. So in those days, there weren't like planes. And so anything that would need to come into a city would have to come on a boat. And so some of these guys, they would be, let's make Pastor Jonathan. You can be a sailor there, Pastor Jonathan. We're even going to give you a little fishing rod. There you go. You can be a sailor and a fisher. So we had some people who would travel, and they would come into Corinth from all over the world. And the other thing that Corinth was really cool for, do I have any sports fans here? Any athletes in the room? I see some kids. Do I have any adults that are athletes? Oh, don't be shy. Okay, online, I see you. So there was, in Corinth, they would host all sorts of sports and these big games, kind of like the mini Olympics. So in this church, there was probably people who were athletes. Let's give her, that's like a little medal. Can you see that? Little medal. She's an athlete. There was all sorts of people that were a part of this church in Corinth. They looked different than each other. They thought different than each other. But they were this church family, and they were learning how to follow Jesus together. Now, here's the problem. They had a lot of issues. So these people, they had a lot of questions. They had all sorts of questions. They also got into some arguments. So I'm going to give them, there was lots of arguments going on in this church, lots of questions, a little bit of a mess, a little bit of some tough moments, some tough issues, because they didn't always get along, and they didn't always get things right. They had arguments on all sorts of things that we've been looking about all summer. Some of those things were, and this sounds so silly, kids, they argued what kind of food they could or shouldn't eat. They argued who was the best leader. That guy's really amazing. Meh, I don't like that guy. They struggled with things like pride and arrogance. So they thought they were the most important people. So they like puff out their chests and walk around like they were super important. They lacked things like humility. They were not humble at all. They thought they were better than everyone else because they were called Christians and the other people were not followers of God. They struggled with mistreating other people. You know what an other person is? An other person is like someone who doesn't look like you or think like you or grow up like you or live like you. They didn't like the people that were others. They didn't like people that weren't like them. So they pointed fingers at each other. They also elevated themselves and thought they were really, really important when God gave them a special gift or a special talent. And instead of using it to help other people, sometimes they used it to help themselves. They argued with each other on what love meant, what it was and what it wasn't. And they doubted God and the future promises that he had given to the world. And so they were kind of a little bit like a messy church. And so their pastor who had planted that church, who had started that church, his name was Pastor Paul. And he was not there anymore. And so he wrote them a letter because he found out all this stuff was going on. So Pastor Paul writes them a letter and he sends it to them to help them fix some of the problems that they were dealing with. And so that's what we've been talking about all summer long. And today we're going to take a peek at the very end of Pastor Paul's letter. Now, we know this is a special Sunday because the kids are with us and we are so excited. So whether you are 5 years old, whether you're 85 years old, this is for you. But parents and adults, I need you to do something for me, okay? The kids are going to bring a lot of energy this morning. You're not bringing me so much energy. I want you to pretend that you are a kid today. I want to hear you. I want to see you moving. You got it? Thumbs up? Okay, yeah, you're awake. There we go. Okay, so I like stories. Does anyone else like stories? Okay, we got some story people. I'm going to tell you a story. So I want you to get comfy. You can cross your legs if you want. You can put your feet up on the pew. That's fine with me. You get nice and comfortable. You settle in. We're going to have some fun together. But before I tell you the story, I have some questions for you. Are you ready? I want everyone to answer. So everybody, if you're under the age of 100, I need you to answer the questions, okay? Very good. Okay, online you can tell me too. How many of you have a bike? Raise your hand. Oh, okay, I heard someone have a bike. Okay, fantastic. We got some bike riders. Keep those hands up, bike riders. Okay, second question. How many of you have a helmet? Oh, see, I should see as many hands up for a bike as helmet. Helmets are really important because they keep this very important part of us safe. This third picture that I'm going to show you, does anyone know who this guy is? This is my friend Ziad. He works at the church with me. He's super cool. Look at him. He's so cool on his bike. This is him on his bike. You can tell he's part of One Church too. He's wearing a Love Army sweater. And does anyone see what's on Ziad's head? It's a helmet. Even adults should be wearing helmets. He has some pretty cool bikes. He's a pretty cool guy. There's Ziad wearing his helmet. Okay, next question. Are you ready? How many of you have ever gotten a bike for a present? Hands up. Ever in your whole life, have I heard that right there, have gotten a bike for a present? Okay, here's the last question I'm going to ask you right now. I want you to think about it and be honest, okay? You ready to be honest? Here's the question. How many of you have ever received a present and thought, don't like it? You opened up, you're like, not what I wanted, not what I was hoping for. Well, I'm going to tell you a story of a kid who received a present that they didn't really like. And when I tell you this story, you're going to think that I made it up. You're going to think that it's from a storybook. And I just want to tell you right now, I thought when I read it, I thought this isn't true. And then I did research and I discovered this is a true story. This actually happened. Are you ready? Once upon a time, in a place on an island in Washington, there was a little boy, long time ago, and his name was Don. Now, here's a sad part of the story. You ready for the sad part of the story? This is really sad. Don's home caught on fire and everything burned, but his family was safe. All the humans were safe. And so Don's family was okay, but his home caught on fire. But the good thing is that he lived in a community that was amazing, that stepped in and helped them. And so when their house burned down, the community started helping them rebuild their life and gave them a bunch of things. And one of the things that they gave to Don was this, a bicycle. They gave Don a bicycle because he was a kid and he needed a bike to get around. The problem was Don did not like this bicycle. It wasn't a cool race bike. It was just kind of a clunky old thing with some rubber wheels, tiny handlebars, kind of like a tricycle. Certainly not a cool bike for a kid of Don's age. So one day, Don was in the forest playing like he did with his friends, and something happened. Don left his bike in the forest. Now, I don't know if he planned to throw it away. He says he just forgot about it, but he didn't really like the bike. And instead, he just went after his friends and he left that bike behind. And the story goes that years passed by. And Don forgot about the bike, never went back. Decades went by. Now, a decade is 10 years. So decades would have been like 10, 20, 30 years go by. Don grows up. He's now an adult, and he hears a story about this place that he used to live where there's a bike that's been stuck in a tree in the forest that he used to play in. So very curious, Don decides to go to that forest and check out what everyone is talking about. And when he got there, he couldn't believe his eyes. This is what Don saw. You look it up, you go to this place, you can see this tree. There it was, his old bike, but it was lifted off the ground and it was wedged kind of in the trunk of the tree. It kind of looked like the tree had swallowed it. And Don looked at it and he said, "That's my bike." He recognized it right away. See, the tree had kept growing and it had wrapped its bark around the bike, and the bike had become a part of the tree. And now people traveled all throughout the world to see it. Now, here's the thing. The tree didn't stop growing when it hit an obstacle. Instead, it grew around it. And here's the truth about us humans. A lot of the time, we are tempted to stop growing when we hit an obstacle. Now, boys and girls, adults, if you don't know what an obstacle is simply is something that gets put in your path and causes you pain and discomfort. Raise your hands if you love being in pain or feeling discomfort. Okay, nobody. Okay, sounds good. How many of you like obstacles? An obstacle is like when your life is going really, really well and then bam, there's a problem. Something you might not have been expecting. Maybe it's something that makes you feel really, really small. Maybe it's a mean person who decides to hurt you. Maybe it's a difficult situation like when someone you love gets sick. Maybe it's when you don't make the team or get the job that you wanted to. Maybe it's facing something really hard, like a family that's going through a divorce or having to start again at a new job or a new school or a new city. Maybe it's the absence or the death of someone you really loved. Those kinds of life's obstacles can make us want to give up, to kind of shrink back, to stop growing. But here's what I love. Trees have the unique ability to teach us how we can grow. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how we can overcome our natural tendency to stop growing when life gets hard and instead keep growing like a tree even through difficult seasons. Now, to get us started, because our kids are with us, we're going to have a little bit of fun. So I want all of the kids, the teenagers, the adults, anyone who's under 100 and is able to stand up to your feet right now. Up on your feet. We're going to move around. There you go. Okay. We're going to do a couple of postures together. So kind of wiggle out your body. You're going to need your whole body. So put your papers down. There you go. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to stand like you normally would. Most of us stand with our shoulders kind of slumped. Pretend, maybe kids, think of when you're in a long line, like mom or dad took you to the store and you didn't want to go. And so now you're standing there waiting forever for them to pick out one thing. There you are, you're standing there, shoulders slumped, your knees are relaxed. You know what I call this? I call this a schlumpy pose. Everyone say schlumpy. Schlumpy. There you go. Feel how that feels? Now I want you to do something different. Instead, I want you to roll your shoulders back. I want you to plant your feet, pick them up and plant them down, kind of shoulder width apart. Do you feel that difference? You can put your hands on your hips. Do you feel the difference? You feel strong. You feel rooted. You're ready to face the day and anything that might come your way. Okay, good job. Shake it out. Next posture. You ready? I want you to take your hands. Take your hands. Everyone show me your hands. Fantastic. I want you to clench them really tight. Clench them. And now I want you to clench your arms, your shoulders, your stomach, your teeth if you can, your face, your knees, your toes. Yeah, I know. I look silly too. Your feet. You feel that? Do you feel all the tension in your body right now? Feel how tense everything feels? Okay, now I want you to slowly open your hands. Open them wide. I want you to turn them up. I want you to release your shoulders, release your arms, release your feet, release your jaw. Sometimes we clench our jaw all the time. We should always try and release it. Release it all. See how that feels? Doesn't it feel more open, more free? Okay, one more. You ready? I want you to look down at your feet, right down to your toes. I want you to hunch your shoulders. I want you to take your arms and cross them like you're really, really angry at someone. How does that feel? Sometimes we do this when somebody hurts us or says something mean about us. And we want to get small, so we kind of get smaller, right? Okay. Now what I want you to do is I want you to open up your arms. I want you to raise your eyes up to the sky. I want you to open up your hands up to the sky, your whole body up to the sky. How does that feel? So much different, right? All of a sudden you're open and ready for what life is going to bring at you. Give yourselves a round of applause. You can sit down. Great job. You know, we all have natural postures that we take in life, especially when we respond when things get hard in life. Some of us will slump instead of standing up tall. Some of us have a tendency of closing our fists when life gets hard instead of keeping our hands open. Some of us have a tendency to look down and away instead of keeping our eyes up. And in the very last part of Paul's letter to the Corinthian church, he's challenging them to live with different types of postures, better postures that look more like Jesus than the world around them. And so we're going to read this part of the letter that Pastor Paul wrote. And kids, what I want you to do is I want you to be looking for clues on the postures that Pastor Paul thinks these people should take in their lives. And here's a hint. We just went through them, so you'll probably be able to find them. Let's read the Bible together. This is how it goes. It says, Pastor Paul writes and he says, now regarding your question about the money being collected for the poor Christians in Jerusalem. So obviously they have wrote him a letter and they've asked some sort of question about why are we collecting money at church? Why do we collect money at church? And so Pastor Paul writes and he says, well, you should follow the same instructions I gave to the other churches in Galatia. So that was another place, Galatia, where Pastor Paul had churches, and he said, I'd already given them instructions, follow the same ones. And this is what Pastor Paul says. He says, on the first day of each week, you should set aside a portion of the money that you have earned. So like adults, we all go to work, we make money. And so Pastor Paul is saying, you should take some of that money that you've made and set it aside. And then Pastor Paul says, be as generous as you can. When I get to you guys, then you'll be ready and we won't have to wait for you to collect the money. Interesting. Then Pastor Paul says, I plan to come visit you after passing through northern Greece. Now I won't be staying there long, but maybe I can stay a while with you. Maybe I can even spend the winter. That's a whole season that he wants to spend with them. Then you can give me a good send-off wherever I may be headed next. Sounds like he doesn't even know where he's going to go next. I don't want to just drop in between other primary destinations. So he's like, I don't want to just go to the important place, come see you, and go to another important place. I want to go and see you because you are important to me too. I want a good, long, leisurely visit if God allows it, Pastor Paul says. In the meantime, he says, I'm going to stay right where I am in a place called Ephesus. Well, this festival of Pentecost goes on. So he's in the city of Ephesus. Pastor Paul's going to stay there while there's a festival going on. And the reason Pastor Paul is going to stay in Ephesus and not come to Corinth right away is he says a huge door of opportunity has opened up for good work. So have you ever had an opportunity open up before you? Sometimes God gives us these chances and we can see what he's doing and invites us into it. Like maybe I go into a new classroom and all of a sudden there's an opportunity for me to make some new friends or use my life to impact other people. Pastor Paul has noticed something has happened in Ephesus, an opportunity has opened, and he says, although many people oppose me. When people oppose you, that means they don't like you. So wherever Pastor Paul is in Ephesus, people aren't really happy with him. Then Pastor Paul writes this, and I'll tell you as a pastor, because I'm a pastor, as a pastor, this one concerns me because he's writing to Christian people, so they're not perfect. This is what he says. When Timothy shows up, so Timothy is this like young leader. He's like a youth or a young adult. He's a young leader. And Pastor Paul is mentoring him to become what Pastor Paul is doing. And so he's a leader and Timothy's a leader. So Pastor Paul writes to these Christians and he says, when Timothy shows up, don't intimidate him. Why would they intimidate him? That's odd. Then he says, Timothy is doing God's work just as I am. Don't let anyone treat Timothy badly or make him feel worthless. Send him on his way with your blessing when he returns to me. And I expect him to come with other believers. And then Pastor Paul at the very end of this letter writes this. He says, be on guard. Keep your eyes open. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. Do everything with love. Don't let your love stop. And so Pastor Paul's final instructions to this church in Corinth, he's reminding them of some postures. The first one he's saying is being open-handed with your generosity. He's also saying be firmly rooted in your faith and keep your eyes and your arms up focused on Jesus. That's what we're going to talk about today. The first one is this: open hands, living generously. Pastor Paul writes this. He says, now regarding the question you asked about why people give money at church, you should do it on the first day of the week and be as generous as you can. So Pastor Paul is giving instructions on how to collect money, specifically for the people who are struggling and the church is going to help. So Pastor Paul says, set aside some money at the beginning of every week so you can be generous and consistent. Because Paul's even saying, keep it at the beginning of the week so you don't go and spend the money before you can give it to what I'm doing, to what God is doing. Now, this is a practice that God has put into place. He talks about it all throughout the Bible. And it's this practice of generosity that God wants us to be generous with the things that he entrusted to us. Because sometimes in the world you can think, my money is my money. My time is my time. My gifts are my gifts. Sometimes I'm tempted to believe, my money is my money. My time is my time. My gifts are my gifts. But the Bible tells us that if we're followers of Jesus, we need to recognize my money is from God, so it's his money. My time is a gift from God, so it's his time. And my gifts are gifts from God, so they are his gifts. And so God asks his followers to be generous with what he has given to us as gifts. That's how we live differently than the world. In the Bible, God calls giving money to the church a tithe. And a tithe, if you don't know what the word tithe is, it means a tenth. And for our kids would know this because they're in math class, but adults, you probably don't understand this because we haven't been in math class in so long. 1/10 of something is 10% of something. And so what happens is that adults here at One Church GO, and some teens and some young adults, and maybe even some kids, they take all the money that they've earned, that they believe is from God, and they take 10%, a tenth of all of that, and they give it back to the church. I do this. When I make money, I take a tenth of what I've made, and I give it back to the church. So if I make $10, if I go babysitting and make $10, I would give $1 to God to invest in his kingdom. If I made $100, then I will take $10 and I will invest it into what God is doing in the world. And this practice, God says, this practice of tithing will develop generosity in my life because our human tendency isn't always to be generous. And so God is creating us to be generous people. And generosity fights against our natural human tendency to keep everything for ourselves. See, our natural posture is to keep our fists tight, holding back out of fear that I might not have enough to get by. Sometimes I'll say, you know what, I'll give when I have more. Or I just need to hold on to this until something bad happens. Or I don't have time to invest my time or gifts to serve or love other people. I need to protect all of my energy right now so that I can survive. But when you live like this, you might be able to keep what you have, but you will never be able to give anything away. And you won't be able to receive anything that God has for you because your hands are clenched so tightly. Friends, closed fists can keep the bad away, but it also can keep out the good. And so we think we're protecting ourselves by closing our fists, but I think we're actually limiting what God can put in our lives. So Paul invites the church in Corinth, and then us as we're reading it, to live differently, to open up our hands and give towards what God is doing in the world, to show God that I trust him more than I trust my own grip. And this just isn't about money. All throughout his letters, Paul talks about that we're to open our hearts with our time, with our encouragement, with our money, with our talents and our gifts, our influence, with our homes. And open hands can sometimes feel risky because it kind of leaves us vulnerable, but open hands actually say, God, I trust you. And a tree models this beautifully for us. Think about a tree, God's gift in nature. A tree gives shade to anything that needs it. A tree gives shelter to birds and squirrels and all types of different creatures. A tree produces nuts and seeds and fruits, not just for itself, but for others to enjoy. Here's the amazing thing. A tree doesn't keep track of what it gives away. It's not like I dropped 10 acorns yesterday, so I can't do anything until I grow 10 more acorns. No, it gives everything away, willing and able to do what it was meant to do. That's a picture of what open-handed living means. See, our natural tendency is to clutch, to hold on, to keep, just in case. But like branches, when we open ourselves up, we're actually more able to bless other people. And this fall is a chance to practice open-handed living. For some of you, you may have never given to what God's doing in the kingdom. That's okay. 10% might feel like a drastic amount to start with. Maybe you start with 1, 2, 5%. For those of us who have practiced this in our lives, then there have been seasons in my life where God has said, 10% is not enough, Jessica. I'm doing something that I want you to invest more in. God's called me to levels of obedience that were beyond that 10%. And it's not just about our money. We need to ask God, where do you want me to invest my time? Where do you want me to invest my resources? Where do you want me to invest my energy to serve you? Friends, open hands is a choice. We get to make that choice. We get to decide, God, I trust you more than I trust myself. The second posture that Pastor Paul was talking about is this idea of being firm-footed, deeply rooted. He writes to them and says, I'm planning to visit you, but in the meantime, I'm staying here in Ephesus because a great door of opportunity has opened up for me. Now, Pastor Paul knows the Corinthians want him to come to them right away. They are impatient people. But Paul is going to stay where God is opening the door. And he says, even though it's not, the opposition isn't strong, so even though it might not be great, he might be struggling, people might not like him, Pastor Paul says, I'm going to stay there because I'm rooted enough in who I am and who God is that I trust God to lead me through, even though it's a little bit difficult. And then Paul says, as soon as God says I can go, I will go. So Paul trusts God enough to wait until God says go. See, our human posture is to schlump, like I said, to stay with where we feel comfortable and easy. Schlumping kind of feels passive, doesn't it? I'm just going to stay where I am because any type of change right now would feel really, really scary. Schlumping feels weak a little bit. In 2025, schlumping can show up when we stay in a job or stay in a relationship or stay in a pattern that no longer is healthy for us because stepping out would feel way too scary. In 2025, schlumping looks like avoiding a conversation or reconciling with someone because that conversation would be way too uncomfortable, so I'm not going to go there. It can be resisting a new opportunity to serve or lead at my church because I've never done it before. I might not have the giftings. I might have to grow a little bit. Schlumping can look like choosing just to coast through life, not really make a plan, to coast through our faith, not really get involved in the church that I go to beyond sitting in the pew or watching online, not getting involved in community, not reading my Bible for myself and learning what God has to say to me, not engaging with God in conversation through prayer. Schlumping at its core is a posture of avoidance. We're avoiding something, but Paul is challenging them to do something different. Be firm-footed. Plant yourself deep in your faith. So when a storm comes, you won't topple over. See, when God calls you to do something, you'll be ready to move and go. It means being rooted in God's truth so that you can withstand a bit of uncertainty in this life. So you can develop a bit of resiliency in this life. See, firm-footed people aren't tossed by every wave of fear because they are prepared. They are steady. They are strong. Firm-footed people are able to remember that God is always with us, even in difficult moments, even when life doesn't go my way, even when I don't get into the class that I wanted to get into, even when I don't get the teacher I wanted to get, even when I don't get the job I wanted to get. When someone is mean to us, God is still in control and God is still with me. Firm-footed people remember that God will help me even when life is really, really difficult. And trees remind us of this too, because from what we can see on the outside of a tree, it looks amazing and beautiful and strong, but there's something going on under the ground when it comes to the tree, and that's its roots. See, roots anchor a tree to the ground so it won't blow over in the wind. Roots have this ability to gather nutrients and gather water from the ground when it hasn't rained in days or weeks or months. Roots have an amazing ability to keep a tree up. See, without roots, life's storms would knock us down flat. But when we are rooted, we can withstand a bit of pressure. We can even step forward when God calls us. Strong roots keep trees up. Friends, in our lives, deep roots look like knowing who we are as a follower of Jesus. Staying connected to God on my own by reading my Bible, by learning to talk to God. Staying planted in the family, the church family that God has given to me, finding connection within it. This is all how we stay rooted in our faith. And this fall, we get to decide how we want to be rooted, how we want to plug in. Kids, this means showing up at church, going to your programs, showing up when something's on so that you can learn more about who God is, so you can find your community, so that you can be supported. It means learning how to read your Bible, because the Bible is God's map for our lives. It means talking to God, not just on a Sunday or on a Friday, but when I'm in class and I'm struggling, or when I'm worried about something, going to God and talking with him. Now, adults, the same is true for us. Being rooted, we need to do these things too. We need to be reading our Bible. We need to be praying and talking to God. We need to be finding community, not just on a Sunday in a pew, but really getting involved in the faith community that God has planted us in. Sometimes for some of us, that might mean finding a group for a very first time at One Church TO. Finding a community to see weekly. It might mean taking out membership at One Church TO, saying, you know what, I'm all in at this church. I'm going to invest here. This is my home. The third posture is this, eyes and arms up. And this is really focused on Jesus and reaching out. Paul writes this, he says, when Timothy shows up, do not intimidate him. He is doing God's work, just as Paul is. And then this is just so hard for me to understand. Why does Pastor Paul have to write to Christians, don't let anyone treat Timothy badly or make him feel worthless? See, Paul's talking about this young leader, Timothy, and he knows that the Corinthians might look down on him because he's young and because he's inexperienced compared to Pastor Paul. And their natural tendency probably is to lower their eyes, probably cross their arms, probably dismiss him until he's ready to be teaching them. See, when we look down, when we cross off our body, it feels dismissive, doesn't it? But when we open up our hands, when we look up, we can do something we're not able to do when we're like this. And it's cheer on the next generation that's coming behind us. See, when we're open, we're able to celebrate. The truth is that we can be quick to write off younger voices, or people who think differently than us, or look differently than us, or people who are just starting out. Sometimes without meaning to, I think we make it hard for the next generation to step up, the next generation to lead. Sadly, sometimes I think for the next generation to follow Jesus. And so Paul writes to them, and he says, do not intimidate them, rather bless them. Lift up your eyes, look at me, open your arms, cheer them on. Or I want to go down instead of looking up to God and Jesus, who can help lead us through. And so Paul is calling everyone to a posture of encouragement and blessing and focus, with our arms and our eyes lifted up, ready to partner with God and what he's doing in this world. And a tree illustrates that so perfectly. Think about a tree. Think about the leaves of a tree. Leaves are like solar panels for a tree. They turn towards the sun and they collect the sun's energy and bring it back into the tree. In fact, if there's a leaf that's kind of like at the bottom or facing the ground, what will happen is a leaf will grow towards the sun. A leaf will always find a pathway towards the sun. And as branches reach out, what happens is they make space for more branches, for more fruit, for more nuts, for more leaves. And that is exactly what happens when our eyes are focused upwards and our hands are outstretched. We're able to make space just like someone has made space for us at some point. That's what God is calling us to keep our eyes on him so that we can stretch our branches wide and make space for the next generation coming behind us. Now, our Next Gen ministries, you heard from Pastor Steph and Pastor Matt, we're stepping into this new season of this fall, and we are really, really excited. There's so many cool things that are going to be happening in the next few months for your kids and your students. And I'll be honest with you, we need a church family that's willing to step in and invest in our students. If we believe that the next generation is important, we need to invest our time and our talent and our treasures and our resources. And so I know that the Next Gen team is in need of some small group leaders who are willing to just sit with a group of kids, share their faith with them, and help make a space for them to learn who Jesus is. The cool thing is, you don't have to be perfect. In fact, I was a kids pastor for many, many years. I was so far from perfect. But God used me because I was present and available. And God will use adults who are present and available. And so if that's you, if you're like, you know what, I could invest in that way in this season, I'm going to invite you to head to the Blue Wall or let us know online. You can go on our website. We are looking for small group leaders at church. Another way to invest into our Next Gen kids and students over this next year is to commit to praying daily for our kids. They are facing some of the things that you and I have never faced before. Some of the conversations they have to navigate, you and I never navigated at our age. And so they need our prayers. They need a church family that's standing behind them and praying daily for them as they head off to school and head off into environments where they can be light and change things. So we're going to ask you to pray for them for this next season, for this next year. And one way you can do this, at the end of this gathering, you're going to leave the auditorium and you're going to be handed a bracelet, kind of exactly like the one I'm wearing. And there's going to be a name of one of our kids on that bracelet. And I'm going to ask you to take that bracelet, put it in your Bible, put it somewhere where you're going to look every single day. And we're going to ask you to pray for that specific kid for this next year, that God would be speaking to them and leading them and drawing that kid closer to themselves. And of course, as you continue to faithfully give and invest in what God is doing here at One Church TO, a portion of every dollar that you give here at One Church TO goes directly to Next Gen Ministries so that we can offer programming, so we can offer safe places, so we can offer opportunities for kids and their friends in our community to know Jesus and grow in him. Here's the question I want you to ask yourself. What would it look like for you to lift your arms and your eyes in this season towards the next generation? What would it look like to cheer on, to invest in, to pray for the kids and the students of One Church TO? Paul invites us, lift up your eyes, look to Jesus. Stretch your arms wide, bless others, open up your hands. Don't just make space to grow for yourself. Grow so that others can grow alongside of you. These are the postures that Paul was encouraging this messy church to start to adopt. And it's those postures that I think God would call us into today. The first one is this: open hands that are ready to give and receive generously. The second one would be this: firm-footed, helping us stay deeply rooted, standing strong in our faith as models for the next generation. And the third one is this: eyes and arms that are open, keeping our focus, our eyes on Jesus, lifting our eyes beyond our problems so that we can see what he's doing and participate in what he's doing. Kids, I wonder, do you remember, it was way back then, Don's bike in the tree? You remember this picture, Don's bike in the tree? See, this bike didn't stop the tree from growing. The bike actually became a part of the tree's story. And that's what happens in difficult moments of life. When we face a challenge, what can happen is God can use it to help us grow and shape us into a great person if we allow him to, remembering that he's always with us. Life will always have difficult moments, but God is always with us. And that is what Pastor Paul is teaching in his letter. See, the Corinthians didn't always get it right. They were messy people, kind of like us sometimes. But Paul says, with their feet planted, with their hands open, and with their eyes lifted up to God, they'll be able to keep growing despite life's challenges. See, we don't stop growing when life gets messy. We grow through the mess. We grow because we are rooted in who God is, and we're focused on God and Jesus. And we're reaching towards other people, inviting them to come alongside of us and grow together. See, as we step into this fall season together, because we are a church family, our prayer would be that we would start to become like a forest of trees, rooted, open-handed, and reaching towards God and the generations behind us. Here's how we're going to close our gathering today. First, I'm going to invite everyone to stand up to their feet. I'm also going to invite our elders to come join me at the front. And kids and students, you can tell an elder at our church because they're all wearing a badge. So as they come up here, elders, come on up right now. You can see the badges that they're wearing. That's because we've identified that they are a safe person for you to pray with. And so if you ever see an elder who's wearing a badge, that's a safe person that you can pray with. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to pray a prayer of blessing over all of us. And a posture that we like to have at One Church TO is sometimes we put our hands out like this. Can you put your hand out like this with me? Nothing magical happens about this. All this is saying is, God, whatever you have for me, I want to receive it. I want whatever you have for me. Any gift, any blessing, I want it. And so I'm going to invite you to put your hands out like this. And I'm going to pray a prayer of blessing over us as we step into the season. And then when I'm done praying, you're going to be able to come up here to our elders, and they're going to pray with you as you step into maybe a new school year, or maybe adults, you're stepping into a new fall season. Maybe there's a challenge ahead. Our elders are going to pray a prayer of blessing over you. And then if you're a kid, they have a special gift, something for you to take, to put in your backpack or your pencil case to remind you that God is always with you. If you're on the main floor, you can join in the aisles, and one of our pastoral staff will point you to where you need to go. In the balconies, you can head down the staircase and join us on the main floor. Let me pray for us, and then we'll come and pray with our elders together. God, I thank you for our beautiful church family. I thank you for all the kids with us, God, all the adults, all the seniors. I thank you you've planted us together, God, that we get to belong to you and to each other. And so, God, I ask that you would plant our feet deep in you, God. Would you help us to be steady in the storms, God? Would you help us to be unshakable in the wind? God, we pray that you would bless us with open hands. God, would you make us generous people that are willing to share what you have given to us, God? And God, would you bless us with eyes and arms that are lifted to you, God? Help us to focus on you, God, to focus beyond our struggles and look to you, trusting that you are going to be with us. You're going to lead us. We are never alone. God, would you make us, this church family, into a forest of strong trees that are rooted and open and looking to you. We love you, God. In your name, amen.